All right, guys, so continuing on, we're going to work on number 7 here. This one is the difference of cubes, so remember that it's the same as the sum of cubes, the signs just change. So when we have our factoring, okay, remember the acronym SOAP? So we're going to use the same sign, opposite sign, and then always positive. All right, so when we factor here, the cube root of x cubed is x, and the cube root of 216 is 6. So when we factor, we're going to have x minus 6 times x squared plus 6x plus 36. Okay, and we are going to solve, so we set it equal to 0. Solving the left side here, x minus 6 equals 0, so x is equal to 6. And then we're going to use the quadratic formula for this piece because we don't know anything that multiplies to give us 36 and adds to give us 6. So we're going to use the quadratic formula. Just going to write that here. Negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay. And it's a different AB than this AB, so don't pay attention to this AB when we're looking at the quadratic formula. So we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 36 all over 2a. And then we're just going to simplify. So we get negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. 4 times 1 times 36 is 144. So it's minus 144. Oops, I forgot to plug in for a here. That should be a 1. And so that's over 2. All right, so simplifying here, we do 36 minus 144, and that's equal to negative 108. So we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 108 all over 2. And then the largest perfect square that's a factor of 108 is 36. So you do negative 6 plus or minus the square root of, I'll break this down for you guys. It's negative 36 and 3 all over 2. So you have negative 6 plus or minus 6i square root 3 all over 2. And we can reduce everything by a factor of 2. So my final answer is going to be negative 3 plus or minus 3i square root 3. Okay, so we have 2 answers here. X is equal to 6, or 3 rather. Here's our one answer. And our other 2 answers come from 3 plus or minus 3i square root 3. All right. I am going to skip number 8. However, I will set it up for you. It's going to be 16x cubed minus 54 equals 0. and then you want to take out a GCF here, and the GCF is going to be 2. So you'll do 2 times 8x cubed minus 27, and notice this is the difference of cubes again. Okay, so it's going to be, when you factor this, 2 times, should be cubed, 2x minus 3, that'll be 4x squared plus 6x plus 9. And then you'll set each of those equal to 0 in solve. And again, to set this equal to 0, you have to use the quadratic formula to solve. The 2 will just kind of drop off and go away. There's no variable with that. Okay, so in order to save time, I'm going to move on to number 10. All right, so notice that this is not set equal to 0. This is a quartic, but I don't think it's the quartic I want to do. So scratch that. Let's not do number 10. Let's do number 9. Okay. So for number 9 here, this is a quartic. So we want to factor this just as we do with trinomials. What multiplies to give us a times c, which is negative 42, and what adds to give us b, which is 1. And that's going to be 7 and negative 6. So when this factors, it becomes x squared plus 7 and x squared minus 6. Okay? So we'll set each of these factors equal to 0 as long as they can't factor anymore, which they can't. So we have x squared plus 7 equals 0. X squared minus 6 equals 0. And now we'll solve. So here we get x squared equals negative 7. So x is equal to plus or minus I, because that's a negative, and then square root 7. And this side, x squared is equal to 6. So x equals plus or minus square root 6. Okay, so we have 4 answers there. We have plus or minus I square root 7 and plus or minus square root 6. All right. Next, I want to go over, let's do number 14. Okay, so for number 14, we want to set this equal to 0. So I'm going to move my x squared over and my 1. So I have 5x to the 4th. 13x squared minus x squared is plus 12x squared. And when I do negative 8 minus 1, I get negative 9. Okay, so now we have a quartic, but this time a is greater than 1. So we want to know what multiplies to give me a times c, which is negative 45. And what adds to give me b, which is 12. And those two numbers, right, what multiplies to give me negative 45 adds to give me 12. That's going to be 15 and negative 3. So this will factor, I'm going to just break up my middle term here. So I have 5x to the 4th, I'll just carry that down. And then my 12x squared, I'm going to break that into 15x squared minus 3x squared. and then carry down my -9. And now we move into factor by grouping. So you group your first two terms and your second two terms. Okay, DCF of 5x to the fourth and 15x squared is going to be 5x squared. When you factor out a 5x squared, you're left with x squared plus 3. And the GCF between -3x squared and -9 is going to be a -3. And we're left with x squared plus 3. All right, so notice we have x squared plus 3 and x squared plus 3 that match. So we'll pull that out to be x squared plus 3. And then I'm left with 5x squared and -3. And now I have completely factored that quartic polynomial. So now that it's completely factored, I can't factor anything else. There's no difference of squares. There's no more GCFs. I am going to set each factor equal to 0. Okay, so on my left side, I'm going to subtract 3. So I get x squared is equal to -3. Take the square root of both sides. X is equal to plus or minus I square root 3. Okay, and then I'm going to add 3. So I have 5x squared equals 3. Okay, before you take the square root, you have to divide by 5. So you have x squared is equal to 3 over 5. And then you'll take the square root. So you have x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 3 over 5. Okay. All right, I would accept that answer, but if this were a multiple choice test on your SOL, okay, the answer wouldn't look like that. I'm going to cross off 16 here and continue with rationalizing the denominator here. So here I have x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 3 over 5. We can write that fraction as separate square root. So that's the square root of 3 over the square root of 5. I don't know if you were taught this in AFTA or not, but to rationalize the denominator, you need to get rid of that square root in the denominator. Okay, so in order to do that, you're just going to multiply by itself. So we have x equals plus or minus the square root of 3 over the square root of 5. I'm going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the square root of 5. So I get plus or minus 3 times 5 is 15. That's the square root of 15 all over square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is just 5. Okay, and that's how it would look as a multiple choice answer on an SOL. So altogether, our answers are, don't want to forget this piece over here, plus or minus I square root 3 and plus or minus square root of 15 all over 5. All right, that'll do it for our second part of the video, and this wraps up factoring and solving polynomials, and we will be moving on next week. Okay, if you have any questions, please reach out. I hope these videos were helpful. Have a good week.